Hi, everybody. Welcome into another edition. This is Cross Functionality, the show connecting coaching, baseball, softball, male and female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. Thank you for being with us today, episode 25, as we discuss implicit and explicit coaching tactics. So let me bring in friend, co-host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama, and current day renowned coach, Cassie Reilly-Boccia. Cass, what's going on?
Thanks for having me. All's going well here. Just cold and windy.
Cold and windy as it is in Tampa, Florida today. 43 degrees. I'm all bundled up. You just got off presenting at a softball convention, and you posted some clips on your Instagram at Coach_Cassie RB. How was that?
It was awesome. This is my second time presenting at the event. I've been there as a spectator in the past, and I thought, how cool it is that we have a tremendous convention in the Northeast in the middle of January where it's usually cold and no one's thinking about softball. But probably the only convention I think that caters to the athlete, the young coach. So like someone who's a parent who's kind of just getting started coaching, and then also a high school or even college athlete or college coach that is trying to bring tactics back for their season. So super cool event, and definitely big recommendation to anybody in the area.
All right. Yeah, perfect. So again, for clips on that, follow Cassie on Instagram at Coach_Cassie RB, at Coach Cassie RB on Twitter as well. I'm at Jim Tara on both platforms as we get into today's episode 25, Implicit and Explicit Coaching Tactics. I do want to ask you this week on the Lab, Jake Epstein and I talked about the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, or watch the show on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast page. We talked about hitting with runners in scoring position, a great hitter that you were. I want to get your perspective, Cass, on what you think about hitting with runners in scoring position, how to approach that, how to prepare for that, and mentally, what are you telling yourself in the on-deck circle? Because hitting with runners in scoring position, at times you can really outpsych yourself.
For sure. I think it honestly goes back to, it's funny what you just said, telling yourself in the on-deck circle. I wanted to be aware of a situation, but not have to think about the situation. So that goes back to your preparation, right? What was going on in practice? Every single day in BP, after we got our swings in, it was, okay, we have a runner on second with no outs and a pitcher who's throwing a curveball, a righty pitcher throwing a curveball. Like, what's our tactic here? And we'd go through different situations, runner on third base with one out, runner on third base late in the game, and it's a one-run game, just different scenarios. So it was running through all these different scenarios beforehand. And to me, that was like you're studying for the test so that you don't get to the test and it's not like you're thinking about, what was in my notes before, this was happening. So, yeah. Something as simple as, knowing when to hit that ground ball to the right side to get the runner to move over, knowing when, okay. And you know what, not even what you want to do, but, if I want to hit a pitch, if I need to hit a pitch to the outfield, what pitches do I like to do that with? You know what I mean? If I knew I needed to hit a sacrifice fly, I wasn't swinging at anything too low in the zone or low and outside. I was looking for different zones because I had practiced that. So I think it's just so beneficial to, practice that with athletes, and it all of a sudden changes the practice and okay, I'm just taking swings to, oh, there's an intent behind the swing. There's actually something I'm working on. So
and I apologize ahead of time because this may be a stupid question. So if it is, and people want to complain about it, email me, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com, or you can tweet at me as well, and you won't get blocked, but you may go to the spam folder in the email. I do want to ask you, though, from the perspective of gathering your approach and having that intent to swing at a certain pitch. Jake talked about it this week when it comes to baseball, because the fields are bigger. You want to hit a fly ball. You want to get the ball in the air. Softball, the fields are a little bit smaller. It's more compact. It's not always the right thing to put the ball in the air. Is that correct? Is that the approach? I mean, what kind of approach are you taking as it pertains to wanting to hit the ball in the air with, say, a runner at third, rather than maybe hit the ball on the ground?
Sure. I think it depends. And the reason why I say it depends is you might be playing at a certain field that's maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe the fences are 200 opposed to 220 or 230. That's going to make a difference. What type of outfielders do you have? We played against some of the best outfielders in the country. And yeah, maybe that scenario was, we're not trying to hit it into the outfield. Now I'm trying to get a gap to gap hit, let's say. Or the runner on third base is slow. That's another thing to take into account. I think for the most part at that high school level, you're not getting these elite athletes in the outfield. Sometimes you are, but it's, certainly college is more concentrated with the type of athlete you're getting. So I'm a firm believer that you still want to try to drive something to the outfield, especially if you're the hitter to do it. Lefty slapper who doesn't have much pop, that's probably not the hitter to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then that's a coach's decision too. Do you take her out and pinch hit, or do you continue with this particular hitter with just a different strategy? So maybe every now and then, but like, I mean, you hit a ball to the outfield, it's still, you don't have an MLB guy standing in the outfield throwing home. You have a young female standing in the outfield throwing home. So it's I still think that's a valuable play.
Yeah, the one thing that you and Ep always talk about when it comes to hitting is being prepared, having that approach and doing your homework. And that you just mentioned that a couple of moments ago. It's no different with hitting with runners in scoring position. All the factors you just mentioned pertain to doing your actual homework, having a scouting report. And these are some of the things you have to be thinking about in the on deck circle.
Sure. Or, even, when it comes time for the other team to be warming up, right? You're watching the other team warm up and take infield, outfield on the field. That's a prime opportunity to just take a peek at what the outfielders are doing. What's their arm look like? And this might be stuff where you're like, I've never heard of this before. I've never thought to look at the outfielder, but maybe we do. Maybe we should look at, what that looks like, especially as a coach. You might be a parent who's filling in as a coach, but this is just another little strategy. It's when you win games, it's not always because you're that much more talented or better. It's because these tiny details fall into place that you become more prepared for. But yeah, I do think like when you're in that third spot, maybe on deck, maybe not, because, maybe you're thinking about your timing just right then and there, but maybe when you're in that third spot, you're talking to a teammate, you're talking to a coach, and you're like, okay, these next two runners get on base. This is going to be the scenario. This runner gets, if I get up with runners on second and third and one out, what pitches am I looking for? And, something so valuable to know. And this is just a quick example. Mm-hmm. I was standing next to my grad assistant and she was talking. She's like, hey, I know you like hitting middle outside pitches to drive balls in the gap. She's like, this girl hasn't thrown a single middle outside pitch to a lefty all day. She's starting in. So back off the plate and drive the ball. So my plan, even though I liked to, I knew for myself, I loved hitting middle outside pitches. I knew that's probably not what I was going to get. So just little things like that where you can start to tweak your strategy. Yes, it might seem a little more complicated, but again, we've talked about this in the past. Our game evolves past just see it and hit it. Sure, like you can have in your head, I'm looking middle in and now I'm going to see it and hit it, but it's not just well, here you go. I'm going to say a little Hail Mary and get up to the plate and hope for the best,
Yeah. Close your eyes and just throw the football downfield. And then look, all the advice and everything you're talking about, all these points you're making, this was what goes into being a high level softball player, a high level baseball player, quite frankly, a high level athlete. If you want to play at that next level, the collegiate level, even the professional level, but talking about softball, just playing at that collegiate level and playing at a top Division I school. These are all things, the whole thing about see the ball, hit the ball. I like that saying, but I like it at times. Other times I really don't, because there's so many more factors that go into thinking about the game, watching the game, seeing the game, and trying to strategize on the fly.
Right. It certainly has a place, because you do not want to be at the plate and being like, okay, runner in right field, or there's a runner on third base. The right fielder has a good arm. I should be like, you don't want to be at the plate thinking of all those things. When it comes time to being at the plate, you do want to just narrow your focus down to, I'm going to get my best swing off on a good pitch to hit. I'm looking sweet spots, whatever it may be, whatever swing thought you choose. It's the everything that leads up to your at bat is what affords you the ability to just simplify things to see it and hit it. It's see it and hit it with a direction, with barriers. It's not just a willy-nilly approach. That's all.
Yeah. Well, good stuff right there. Again, subscribe to the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast this week. Jake Epstein and I, renowned hitting instructor, talked about hitting with runners in scoring position. We broke it all down. So please subscribe to that podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Watch the show on YouTube, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page. And of course, cross functionality. You can subscribe to this show, Apple, Google, Spotify. We're on Pandora, iHeart, TuneIn Radio as well. We're on Stitcher, on all the platforms, so whichever you choose. And of course, watch the show Softball Strength Academy. Much thanks. All right. Implicit and explicit coaching tactics. That's our main topic today, episode 25. Let's get into this a little bit. Now, I want to ask you, because I'm not sure a lot of people know what implicit and explicit coaching tactics are. I'm sure they've done it before, meaning parents. I'm sure that they've actually done it before without knowing that they've done it before. And some coaches probably in the same scenario. But what does it mean, implicit and explicit coaching tactics, when you talk about coach-driven and athlete-driven?
Sure. Sometimes certain definitions are or topics, I should say, become more complicated when you try to find a direct definition. So if you go and you look up definitions of both these words, you're like, okay, wait a second, what exactly does this mean? But when you start to dive into the coaching theories and the development of both these concepts, it starts to make a lot more sense. And explicit is something that is super, super, super direct. And if anyone has kids, you could say, to a 5-year-old, hey, go get dressed. And that might be very implicit. And they come out and they're dressed in the completely wrong thing, right? If you say it explicit is like, I need you to put these socks on with these pants, these underwear, right? Because they might come out with their underwear over their pants, whatever it may be. Implicit, you're kind of leaving it up to them. Explicit, you're explaining exactly what you want. Now, how does this pertain to coaching? Mm-hmm. At a certain age, and really, honestly, it's not necessarily age, at a certain point of development, depending on how young their talent is or how young their development is, we need to start to remove the explicit and really leave it up to the athlete to figure things out on their own, which is the implicit. So, if I have a 16-year-old in the cage who's rolling over a ball over and over again, it is going to be much less beneficial for me to say, hey, I need you to lean back a little bit more. I need you to get your hips cleared so you can get your back elbow in through the zone so that we can now keep our hands inside the ball, have bat lag, and hit the inside half of the ball. Yeah. Opposed to me saying, listen, I need you to figure out a way to get this ball into the opposite field corner. And now they might fail a couple more times, but they are creating such a stronger neural motor pathway for their body to self-regulate and figure out how to accomplish that on their own than because someone just told them how to do it exactly. And right. That's really what translates to future and in the game.
So to me, it sounds like you're pointing that athlete in the right direction. You're leading the horse to water, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Now they just have to drink it. But the important part is being able to communicate what you want them to do as a coach and how to actually lead them to that point.
For sure. And, sometimes I think it's really valuable for a coach, and it's hard to do because I'll, do 5, 6, 7 hours straight of coaching. I'm exhausted, but sometimes I'll sit down and I'll write like similar issues that a lot of my athletes had. And I'll write down, okay, well, we had a really tough time with this drill. Why? Well, a lot of my athletes are having a tough time saying back why. Okay. What are some implicit cues or implicit ways I can get them to figure this out on their own? And that's a practice as a coach that I think we really have to participate in because it's easy. It is so easy to just be like, this is what you're doing, fix it. Stop doing this and do this instead. Go. Mm-hmm. And sure, maybe it works for that one session, but it's not going to stick. It's going to be very acute of a change opposed to a long-term change. And to be honest, that's actually why I made a shift from one-on-one sessions to 3-on-1 sessions. Not that you can't have implicit styles applied in.
Meaning one coach and 3 students.
Athletes.
Yeah.
Yep.
3 athletes, right.
So instead of having, a girl would take a swing and look at me and be like, what am I doing wrong? When I have them in this 3-on-1, they don't always have the opportunity to do that. And I'm really pushing them and challenging them and encouraging them to start to figure things out on their own. And the changes I've seen in athletes, it's led me to believe, one, what a disservice it's been to not have this environment sooner. And 2, how can I make this environment even better? How can I make it even more in the athlete's hand opposed to a coach just driving their development car the entire time?
Yeah, that's a great point. Putting it in the athlete's hands, you're not going to be there when they're at the plate. You're not going to be there when they're talking in terms of baseball, softball, when they're in the on-deck circle. You're not going to be there if you're a basketball coach when they're at the free throw line telling them about what they're doing wrong. Fundamentally, they have to be able to self-correct. And that's an important piece, right, of implicit and explicit coaching.
Oh, 100%. Right. So now you're having this session be athlete driven. You're having, I say an athlete figures it out and I go, hey, what'd you try? And she's like, I thought about my head here. And I've never said that to them. She's never heard that, but she figured that out on her own. So now, one, you have an athlete who's really proud of themselves. You have an athlete who has figured out what will work best for them. Yeah. And it's not even when they're at the plate. What about when they go to college to go play softball? How many times does an athlete go off to college? They don't have their hitting coach with them. They don't have their parent with them. And all of a sudden they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do when their swing starts to feel weird. They don't know what to do when they're struggling in a game. And it's unfair to say, well, you have a college coach who should figure it out. That's not necessarily the college coach's job either. They're just meeting this athlete for the first time, from a developmental standpoint. So I think, again, we're doing so much good for the athlete in the long term by having them struggle a little bit in the short term. Because, yeah, maybe it takes them 8, 9, 10, 11 swings to figure it out, opposed to just me telling them exactly what it is. But again, we're pointing them in the right direction and then saying, okay, your answer is somewhere in this side of the room. And then they have to go search for it.
What are some examples of explicit coaching tactics? We've talked a little bit here about implicit, but what are some more examples of explicit coaching tactics?
Sure. I think sometimes we get there with overcoaching mechanics, and I see parents again, because they want to help their athletes so much, but they show me a video of them in the game, and they show me a video of a Major League Baseball player, and they're like, look, do you see how his front leg is straightening out right here and hers is not straightening out? And like, he just has, like, he's literally holding the athlete's knee in this position. So it's, again, we're telling the athlete exactly the specific thing that they have to focus on. And now, okay, so we have an athlete hyper focusing on one aspect, but two, they don't necessarily know why they're doing that, what this is going to help, or how to get there on their own. They can only get there if they only think of that knee straightening out. So now we have an issue where our focus is a little off. I really do think the mechanics piece becomes so of a point of contention. But I also think sometimes too, the athlete is, typically a very cerebral athlete, an athlete who is very into their studies, super intelligent. Like, they want this perfect swing. They want to know what they're doing, why they're doing it wrong. And they'll take a swing and be like, what did I do wrong? What did I do this? What about this? I kind of felt this. And it's right. Every single swing they're trying to like hyper manage, hyper focus to get exactly right. And that probably isn't the end game or the end goal.
And a lot of times parents are focusing on like the wrong mechanics that don't really, I don't want to say mean as much, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not one of the absolutes, not one of our 4 pillars of hitting that we've talked about a couple of episodes ago. Mm-hmm. But it's not one of, like, for example, straightening out your front leg. It could help a little bit, I guess, with leverage, right? But it's not something that's an absolute. More of an absolute is getting on playing with the pitch, but parents focus on, the wrong things, and they pound that into that hitter's head, and that hitter's now thinking about the wrong thing and forgetting completely about how to coach themselves. And they're just laser focused on that one fundamental that they may be doing wrong, and that coaches have pointed out, or actually coaches and parents have pointed out.
Oh, for sure. I mean, a big one is like, I'm dropping my hand, so I need to work on that. And I asked the athlete, well, why do you think you're dropping your hands? And she's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, we don't know, right? Or like, we're doing something because there's something before it that's off, or maybe we're only doing something off of front toss, or we're only doing something off of live pitching. So, then it's like, okay, well, do we think we actually have a timing issue than we do a mechanical issue? And she's like, oh, maybe. Like, so it's trying to get the athlete to ask why. Like, why am I doing this? Why is this helping? Like, what's our end goal here? Is our end goal to have a perfect swing, or is our end goal to hit the crap out of the ball in game and be a dominant hitter, right? We don't want to just develop swingers. We want to develop hitters. And same thing with fielders and throwers. We want to develop really well-rounded athletes that are fielding balls, throwing balls, and able to, make these in-game adjustments, make these in-flight adjustments, and not have to worry about, well, did I get a co-contraction of my lateral obliques, So it sometimes falls into the boat of an internal versus an external cue, where, not all the time, but mainly if I say, well, listen, I for a young athlete, I want you to make this ball sound as loud as possible hitting up against this mat. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden they actually take a hack, and guess what? All of a sudden their swing kind of regulates the right way. Or like I said, I want you to try to hit opposite field. Someone who is coming forward a lot in their swing and they're not having the ability to stay back. If I say, well, listen, I need you to try to hit a fly ball to your pull side, it like forces them to stay back all of a sudden. And they weren't having to think about it that way. So again, if I'm giving them the direct answer, that's not necessarily implicit, but I'm trying to guide them in that direction a little bit more, trying to get their body to feel what they need to experience a little bit more.
So through implicit and explicit coaching tactics, and that's our topic today, episode 25. Any questions, email us, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. How do you get the athlete to take ownership through these certain tactics?
It's definitely a conversation, and it's also trying to expose the athlete to the benefits of it more and more. So it depends, right? You have a really young athlete, they might not know which way's up. They're like, I'm just trying to hit the ball here. But you have a 15, 16, 17-year-old who's maybe about to go off to college. You're explaining like, listen, these are the benefits of me not telling you the answer right now. I know you want to know what's wrong. I know you want to stop this and just say, wait, I need to break my swing. Like, can you film it? Can we put it in that app? But this is not what's best for you. And my job is to guide what's best for you. So there is some discomfort because with, comfort and growth can't sit at the same table together. So if we want to be growing, we have to allow some of this discomfort to fall into place. But I think when I ask the athlete, hey, what do you feel like you need to work on today? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, I know they're getting it when they start to answer with, you know what, I'm really trying to hit the ball hard opposite field. And I want to try to figure out a few positive cues that I can help with that. So when I ask them what they want to work on, it's what I'm going to do, not what I'm expecting you to do for me type thing. Or I'm hoping to get out of this. It's like, this is the practice. This is the payment I'm making for today for myself. So it's their language starts to shift a little bit more.
So it sounds like guided discovery in a way.
I hope. Yeah. And I talk to my friends who are teachers and it's very, very similar where, again, we're pointing them in the right direction and having them find it out for themselves. And, from a learning standpoint, I don't love this example because I don't love the idea of someone touching a hot stove, but you could tell someone to not touch a hot stove all you want. Yeah. But they're going to learn so much more than if they end up touching the stove and get burned. So you kind of like, as much as we want to rescue athletes sometimes, it's like, well, I don't want you to fail in these sessions and I want you to succeed. It's beneficial to experience a drill or something that exposes what they're doing wrong, that makes that feedback or that failure louder, where it's like, okay, I'm not. And now our body is put in a position where we have to work even harder to correct. We have to work even harder to, I'm coming forward, I'm going to put you downhill and make it feel even harder to stay back. And now I'm going to take that wedge away. And now all of a sudden you're feeling a lot better with it. And they understand like, okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, I didn't just put you in a position so you swung correctly. I put you in a position that was going to force you to have your body figure it out on its own.
What do you make of task-driven coaching? Kind of touched on it a little bit today. What do you make of that as it pertains to implicit and explicit coaching tactics?
I think it depends on the task, right? So if I really want the athlete, if I have an athlete who has difficulty focusing or even has performance anxiety because they're focusing on the potential for failure, and we need to manage some performance anxiety, we might say, okay, let's define our task. And our task should not be like, I'm not going to drop my back elbow. Or drop my back shoulder. Our task can be, I'm getting my sweet spot to the ball. I'm getting my sweet spot to the ball. I'm getting my sweet spot to the ball. And then, so now that we have identified like a positive task that's going to be productive, that can be their focus. If we have someone who can't identify a proper focus, we might, that might be our first job for the day is like, okay, we're going to actually focus on, this is why conversation in the beginning of a session becomes so helpful, is because we need to probably shift that focus for them and not let them spiral down a line of, well, my dad said I'm doing this in a game and it's not happening here, but I know it's going to happen in a game. So I need to extra focus on this piece, And I give these examples, and I know I call dads out a lot with hyper focusing on mechanics, but it is unfortunately like the norm. I do have a lot of moms that are hyper focused on their swing, and I have some moms and dads who don't worry about their kids' swing. So it just depends.
You just got to find that right balance, right?
Yes. Yeah. Shoot. I mean, at the same breath, it's sometimes really valuable to get a parent's thoughts, like how did her swing look? And that's also, okay, so ready, this is like an implicit versus explicit teaching experience for the parent too. Yeah. Where I'm like, what did you see? And it's like, you know what, something about timing just looked off. And now the athlete's like, yeah, you know what, now that you say that, like, I did feel something was off. I wasn't like, and they can have conversations, and the dad's like, well, remember when you played that team 2 weeks ago? And she's like, yes, that felt a lot more productive. And it's just, you want the parent to be a positive mirror, like of allowing conversation to happen, and not just this is what you did, this is what I saw, you got to fix this. The next time you go to Cassie, you got to fix this. I don't know what, it's a very, very different conversation. And one is going to, obviously the parent wants to help the athlete, but what's productive for what the parent thinks, we need to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what is actually productive for this athlete right now?
Yeah. So in your experience, which parent is worse when it comes to softball? Is it softball dads or softball moms? With baseball, it's clear cut. Baseball dads, because at 9 years old, they all think they're all going to the major league.
Okay, well,
It's the
I'm gonna
truth,
say it is okay. The hardest I've seen an athlete hurt, because that's what I would categorize as, is a girl who is having a hard time connecting with her dad in some aspect, and the only connection she has with her dad is through softball, and he becomes her coach. And I've seen girls feel like they've kind of lost their dad in replacement of a coach, and and so I've seen girls really struggle with that a lot. Not saying that all girls do, but that is when I've seen girls hurt the worst with how they're trying to interact with their dad, how they want. I asked a girl one time what her confidence, last time her confidence was at a 10. And she explained she had gotten a hit and was standing on second base. And I said, well, how'd you know you were confident? And she's like, my dad was smiling in the, and I was like, okay, let's reshift it back again. Like, let's define confidence again. But so much of her self-esteem and self-worth was dependent on her coach's approval, which is obviously her dad. So it was, again, it was just, I think that is such a difficult and sensitive relationship to manage when you have a parent who's also your coach. So that is, I'd say, the worst I've seen. But I have heard that pitchers' moms are pretty impressive.
I can see that,
with their anxieties pouring out of them. So, but I don't work with pitchers, so I'm just a hitters coach.
So basically, softball is saving some girls from daddy issues. We're getting that here.
I hope girls and parents are managing that well. It's hard. I don't think it's easy, and I think there are some parents and dads who it's the greatest thing that they've ever done, and they can manage it really well, and they're really aware of what's going on with their girl, and they have found really positive ways to communicate. They're willing to show up for uncomfortable conversations. It is a two-way conversation, not just a I tell you this, you do this conversation. So yeah, I think it depends, but that's what I've seen.
So what's your final message today on our topic, implicit and explicit coaching tactics? What is the main point that we want to get across today?
Sure. I think implicit might not always seem like the easiest. I think it's going to cause us as coaches to probably take a step back from being an autopilot and kind of say, okay, hang on. How can I get this athlete to figure this out on their own? And that is a little bit more difficult. It's less systemized. It's a lot more personal. And I just encourage maybe take 10% less swings in your session to have a little bit of a longer conversation, and that'll pay off dividends in the future. And see if you start to see the same results that I started to see when I really became aware of this type of style.
All right. Well, very good this week. Anybody, if they have any questions, email us again, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com, or reach out to us on social media at Jim Tara on both Twitter and Instagram, at Coach_CassieRB on Instagram, at Coach CassieRB on Twitter. Episode 25. Thank you for joining us today. Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, watch the show, Softball Strength Academy YouTube page. If you want to watch us do the show, we would really appreciate that. So thank you very much. And episode 26, we will talk to you next week. Take care, everybody.